Okay, so we're going to start this week. We want to give a shine another spotlight on the international scene at the NFL. So, as everyone's watching this can probably tell, neither myself nor Eddie are American. We are international fans, based here in the UK. We have a lot of our audience are based in the UK and in countries like India. So we look at everything we look at. We look at very much from an international slant. Now we've talked a lot over the past week about how the NFL is growing internationally, and they really are going on a full-on world tour this season. 7 games in 5 different countries. It's quite clear, isn't it, Eddie, that the NFL now is certainly seeing themselves as a global event.
Yeah, they definitely are. And it's quite wild when you step back and look at it, right? Because you and I were talking about it the other time about when we started watching the NFL and how difficult it was to watch games on TV. And it wasn't too long ago when it used to be, just about one game, in Wembley. And then it grew to about 3 games, happening in Wembley. And now, there are games at Wembley and Tottenham Hotspur. But now you're looking at countries like Germany, you've got Brazil, you've got Spain, and of course they've been doing Mexico as well. And this year they're also adding Ireland, Dublin, into it as well, which is crazy. And one of the things that this year is happening is that the Vikings are actually playing back to back. Games overseas, which is something that it tells you that the teams are getting more comfortable, with coming abroad, and playing the game. Obviously, you've got the Jaguars who've kind of made the UK almost like a home, place for them. Cleveland Brown have come a few times as well. So it tells me that the teams are getting more comfortable with it as well. And it's good for the fans, right? It's good for the fans because it reminds me a little bit about the WWE, right? They've kind of got this expansion thing, nailed down to a T, right? Triple H was talking about even bringing WrestleMania, into Europe. This is something that, has never happened. So who knows, is it possible that there's a Super Bowl, that might be brought outside of the United States? I know it might not be anytime soon, but just imagine the possibility, of just opening the Super Bowl to so many more people. But now you've got NFL games at the Bernabeu, right? This is like a holy ground for like football fans, right? In terms of going in there, the iconic team Real Madrid that plays on that ground week in week out. Now you've got NFL in Spain. It's absolutely bucket list stuff. And for me, like I think about the overseas games, the international games, and every trip has some kind of memory for me. Going into Wembley, whether it's Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and then all of that, and it really starts from leaving home. You get your jersey on. Obviously, I've got my Dallas Cowboy jersey. And it's funny thing is that I actually have a Cooper Rush jersey. I don't know why I did that. But I have a Cooper Rush jersey. And then I've got my Cowboy jersey on. And right from the train station, you start to see all the photo fans. You see Falcon fans, Green Bay fans, Saints fans. And everyone is acknowledging each other. You're like you get on the train and everywhere is colored, with NFL fans all the way. Everyone is talking about their teams, talking about, rivalries and all of that, and all very, healthy, friendly. You get into the stadium and you still feel the vibe. So you almost start to enjoy the experience even before you get to the stadium, and that for me leaves a lasting memory because, going to watch a game is like a day out. If you can get you go with your kids, go with family, but sometimes you might not remember everything in the game, but you remember that experience, that feeling you got going to the game and then leaving the game as well.
Look, absolutely. I mean, I remember the first couple games that came to London. I don't even think they sold out. Right? I don't. There was a couple that getting tickets was actually pretty pretty easy for. But
Mm.
now you can, if you're, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to the games this season because of logistic and transport costs and the fact that they always fall around my daughter's birthday. Um, but if you wanted to get a ticket now, I mean, Eddie, you got tickets to see.
I did.
It's so difficult
Crazy. It's crazy.
so difficult to get a ticket now, which is great. My only concern is that because the way they do the tickets and they set it at such a high price barrier now, in a lot of cases, it's stopping new fans,
Mm.
right? Because you can't be a casual fan and get a ticket now in a
Yeah.
lot of cases.
Yeah.
You have to be a diehard fan, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because again, it shows how many diehard fans there are. But you weren't a diehard fan, Eddie, until I took you to that first game.
Yeah.
And
So your fault.
I know I apologize. This is why you brought me onto this podcast basically a form of repentance, but it's kind of pricing out those casual fans from going, and
Mm,
maybe those
yeah.
families from going. So that would be my only gripe on it.
Yeah.
But it just shows how far the game has gone when it wasn't just. I mean, look, the Jaguars you mentioned, they've basically become London's de facto team, haven't they?
Hmm.
Really,
Yeah.
and it's because they are, in terms of fan base, one of the smallest fan bases in the NFL, just in terms of their actual pull. And then you've got the Khan family who own the franchise, have ties into a football
Fulham.
club over here, which is Fulham. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's an easy transition for them to do, is try and grow their brand and grow their base. But then you look at now some of the other clubs who back in the early days might have been a little bit standoffish about going to London, about we don't want to miss a home game, or we don't see the benefit of going. Everybody wants to come now.
Yeah.
Every team wants to come. You mentioned the Vikings doing back-to-back games. And every player there who plays in these games say what an incredible experience is. It's so different to playing the home games or playing in America because of the understandable tribalisms in the fan base. So in the stadium, sorry. So I think it's fantastic to see. I do think that the idea of having a Super Bowl over here is fanciful. I do not think a country that in a moment is standing on a "Make America Great Again" platform is going to give away their biggest sporting occasion in the calendar to an international market. I'd be amazed if that would happen. I would love it, but I'd be amazed just from a time difference perspective.
Yeah.
Like, it would have to be at like midnight if it was in the UK, just to make it. Well, I mean, when we watch the games, I mean, I was up to like 4 in the morning last year
Yeah.
watching the games, and
Yeah.
they're not going to play at 4 o'clock in the morning at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, are they? To fit it with the US audience, but
Yeah.
so the one thing is, just as we sort of like move this, I think the one thing that I think that really has again given rise to the popularity of the NFL is it's not just in the stands, it's not just online and morons like us talking about it. It's actually some of the players now who are coming in,
Mm,
and the international player pathway. I think that's how it's described. That is now building some real prospects. It's
yeah.
it's it's changed from the fact where you may have had one or two players in there from say Britain might have tried, or former Olympians or former rugby players have tried to have a go, or they have a random kicker or a punter. He's also English, but actually now we're getting some real prospects coming through, and it's not just from Britain as well. There's people from all over Africa who are coming through.
Yeah.
So I mean that's just showing, I think, how far the game has grown as well.
Yeah, and the expansion program, I think the NFL really believe in it because you see the teams are embracing the talent that are coming from abroad. Probably the most famous one is Mailata, in the Eagles, who's won a Super Bowl. And he came in through the international pathway program. Now we've got a guy called Leander Wiegand, from Germany, now at the Jets. You've got Jordan Mailata, who switched from rugby, as well. And then, there are some young prospects, who are, looking for a squad place, in the NFL teams. And I think that the NFL is investing in a lot in the program. So you see a lot of, documentaries, in the UK here talking about, young kids, being introduced to the game. It won't be long before you start seeing things like, camps and stuff like that, where they actually start to teach kids the fundamentals of American football. And then they start to have, real competitive, NFL games in terms of at a very low level. I know they were talking about having a team, based outside here. And I don't think that's too far-fetched to think that, that would not happen soon. I mean, if you look at now the reach of the NFL, they've got NFL games on Amazon Prime. This year there's going to be on Netflix, as well. There's going to be streaming on Netflix. So now people have an opportunity to watch the game, in so many different ways. And
Mm.
that can only just make the game even more popular. I remember
Yeah.
growing up, the basketball, when it comes to American sports, was the most popular sports back then.
Mhm.
Everyone was talking about Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, all of that. It was basketball or nothing, right? But now I think it's kind of swinging towards the NFL, and American football, and having a lot more people have conversations, about American football, loving the sport. Fantasy is also growing, in a big way, also in the UK as well. So
Uh,
I think it's
yeah.
good.
No, I think you're right. I think in certainly in UK, I think the NFL is the number one American sport in the UK now, certainly from a fan's perspective. And I remember speaking to my old man about it because he was a person who got me into NFL because when he was when he was a lad in the 70s, he started watching and liking American football. I think it was in the 70s, 80s, and his team was the Giants. He said the only way that he could ever watch highlights was on a Saturday morning on, I think it was on Channel 4, it would have been, and they just showed last Saturday's games.
Mm,
Just like a half an hour highlight. I mean, Jesus Christ, half an hour to highlight all of the NFL action over a weekend. That's you're not going to do that. But that was the only way you could really get to watch games. And then obviously the NFL tried to dip their toe in the water in the UK. They had a few games over here in the old Wembley Stadium, and it didn't really take off to the extent that it has now. But I think that you're right in terms of the accessibility that they've got over here. Because for those who don't know, obviously, if you're a Sky Sports customer, so Sky Sports or Sky TV is the big one of the big TV companies over here.
yeah.
If you have Sky Sports, you've got a whole channel dedicated to the NFL,
Yeah.
right? They will show three or four live games a week. They'll show audio analysis. They will show programs from the NFL Network. We actually have the Red Zone
Yeah.
on another channel, so we have all of that. And I think the one thing that NFL do really well, we've talked about this before when we talk about Hard Knocks, is actually building those narratives, doing the
Yes.
behind the scenes things, and it makes the football more, makes the NFL if more accessible.
Yeah.
And NFL literally 4 hours ago, Netflix have announced a second series of The Quarterback,
Yeah.
which is their series. Again, getting something on Netflix gets more people engaged, and an international audience, it gets them more engaged, understand the stories behind it. Because the NFL as a sport, American football actually as a sport, does have a couple things that might be stopping people watching it. So you talk about
Mhm.
the NBA,
Yeah.
very fast paced, high scoring,
Yes.
120 to 106 or whatever it is. The game's an hour long. It's a simple it's an incredibly skilled and complex game to play, but as rules, it's quite simple to follow.
Yeah.
Right? The NFL isn't.
No.
Right? It's stop start. It's an hour on the clock, and it takes 3 hours to play. How the hell? I mean,
The
I've got
math's
to.
not matching.
Yeah, I mean, I've got two young girls. If they understand basketball because they play netball,
Yeah.
every time I've got NFL and they go, Daddy, I don't understand American football. And I say to myself, I'm not even going to bother trying. Right? I'm not even going to try. They don't understand why it's called football.
Yes.
Right, that's just a very basic thing. So it's got a few things going against them in that way, but
Mm,
the fact that they can build the narrative and build those stories and give people access to behind the scenes stuff and making these documentaries, that is how they grow an audience. That's one thing they've done really, really well,
yeah.
and it's for fans like us and internationally. I think it's great for us to do. We wouldn't be sat here talking this sort of nonsense for an hour if it wasn't the case.
True. Very true. Very true. Thank you for tuning to this episode of the Cross the Gridiron.
So, for more NFL related news, insights, and somewhat outlandish Cowboys opinion and rants, please leave a comment or hit like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification button so you never miss a video of any of our nonsense.
And we'll be back soon at Across the Gridiron.